They say a man who has achieved nothing by the age of 40 has already reached the end of his road. Most people nod when they hear this, but I was that man. My name is Song Yingxing. My courtesy name was Chang'eng, the evening star that hangs quietly in the western sky at dusk, the bright planet people once called the harbinger of dawn. My elders gave me that name with the quiet hope that I would one day light up the family name. Yet most of my life was spent walking under a slowly darkening sky, on roads that seemed to lead only to more examinations. I was born in the 15th year of the Wanli reign, in Yanfang village, northern Fengxin County, Nanchang Prefecture, Jiangxi. At the entrance of our village stood a stone memorial archway, tall and heavy, erected by the court to honor my ancestor Zheng Kun. He had passed the Jinshi examination many years before I was born, risen to high office, and died long before I could ever see his face. Every time I entered or left the village, I had to walk beneath that massive stone arch that bore his name. The old men of the clan would sit with their pipes in the evening and tell the children, "Study hard. If you succeed, you too can win this kind of glory." My grandfather was Zheng Kun's third son. They said he was brilliant in his youth, but he died at 26, leaving my father an orphan. My father grew up on the stories of his grandmother, trained carefully in the old rites, and spent 40 years sitting for the provincial examination without ever passing. He had 4 sons. I was the third. By my father's generation, the Song family had already declined, though a whole room of old books still remained. My mother was a peasant woman who could not read a single character. When she worked in the fields, I would follow behind the ridges. I learned how rice seedlings must be planted in flooded paddies, how the water in the ditches must be released, how the yoke must rest on the buffalo's neck, not from the ancient books at home, but from squatting at the edge of the fields with wide, curious eyes. Years later, people would ask me, "You were a Juran. How do you know so much about farming?" I would think of my mother's bent back in the soft light of late afternoon. It was not high learning. It was the living root of survival. Still, I was a scholar. From an early age, my elder brother and I sat in a drafty study room. The elders liked to tell a story from my childhood. One day the road was flooded and I arrived late. The teacher ordered me to recite the day's lesson as punishment. I opened my mouth and recited it without a single mistake. When he asked when I had studied it, I answered that I had simply listened to my brother reading outside the window and remembered it. My elder brother was upright and believed every word of the sages without question. I was different. The longer I studied, the more quiet questions rose inside me. Why do the stars move in ordered paths? Why can the cry of a bird in a deep valley travel so far across water? Why does the same bean yield different harvests in 2 different fields? The 4 books and 5 classics held no answers. Whenever I asked, the teacher would only tap the desk with his ring and say, "A gentleman is not a vessel. Do you understand?" He meant that a true scholar should carry the whole empire in his heart and ponder the great policies of the state, not waste time on ordinary crafts. I was not convinced. How could one speak of governing the world when one could not even fill one's stomach? So I secretly read Li Shizhen's Benkao Gangmu and books on astronomy. In a private school that worshipped Confucian orthodoxy, I became drawn to Zhang Zai's philosophy of qi, the idea that all things under heaven are formed from the gathering and dispersal of primordial energy. It told me that the world was not made only of empty rituals, but of things that could be seen, touched, and measured. Yet no matter how many quiet thoughts filled my mind, only one road was open to me: the imperial examinations. The stone archway at the village entrance still stood. My father had examined for 40 years until his hair turned white and still never saw his name carved upon it. This path was not chosen by me. It was given the day I was born. I had to walk it. 10 years of study passed almost without notice. At 29, I went with my elder brother to Nanchang for the provincial examination. More than 10,000 candidates from across Jiangxi competed for 109 places. On the day the results were posted, the crowd outside the examination compound was a dark sea of heads. I pushed through slowly. There, on the red paper in black characters, 3rd place, my name. My brother's name was 6th. When I finally forced my way out of the crowd, my legs felt light, as if walking on soft earth. The villagers beat drums and gongs to welcome us home. We walked beneath the ancestral archway. That evening our father, who had examined for a lifetime, drank a little wine, held my elder brother, and wept quietly. I stood to the side. The evening wind rose gently. I looked up at the stone that bore our ancestor's name, and for the first time felt it was no longer only a weight. It was watching. It was waiting. I was 29, 3rd in the entire province. I believed the next step, the metropolitan examination, was only a matter of time. That same winter, my brother and I carried our bundles and set out for the capital, more than 3,000 li away. Out of Nanchang, down the Gan River, across the wide waters of Poyang Lake, into the Yangtze, then north along the Grand Canal. 50 days if the water was favorable, longer if the river froze. In the spring of 1Li44, I was 30 years old when I first stepped into the examination cells of the Beijing Gongyuan. They were narrow brick rooms where a man could barely stand upright, where eating, sleeping, and relieving oneself all happened in the same small space. 3 sessions later, I walked out thinner, eyes rimmed with red. On the day the results were posted, I searched the list from top to bottom and bottom to top, again and again. Neither my name nor my brother's appeared. We returned south and entered the White Deer Grotto Academy for further study. 3 years later, at 33, the second failure came, then the third, then the 4th, then the 5th. 16 years, 6 journeys north and south, more than 30,000 li. I never once saw my name on the metropolitan list. On those long roads, I saw things most scholars never see. I watched how rice is grown differently in the misty south and the dry north. I saw furnace workers in Weiyang standing close to white molten ore under a heavy sun. I listened to the boatmen's chants as they hauled grain toward the capital. I stood outside the kilns of Jingdezhen and counted the many careful steps that turn clay into porcelain. I saw the bamboo poles pushed deep into northern coal mines to release the deadly gas before men could descend. I asked blacksmiths about the exact heat needed to forge steel. I asked weavers how so many silk threads are arranged on a flower loom. At first, I asked only out of quiet curiosity. But the more I asked, the more clearly I began to see something that stayed with me through the nights. The skills that feed the entire empire have never been carefully written down. The people who practice them cannot write. The people who can write consider such things beneath them. So entire crafts die with the craftsman and are buried in the earth. In the 4th year of Chongzhen, on the way back from the 6th failure, the boat reached Poyang Lake under a grey sky. I stood at the prow and looked at the dull river water. 45 years old, 16 years, 30,000 li. I understood quietly that in this lifetime I would never pass the Jinshi examination. Strange to say, the moment I accepted it, a great weight seemed to ease from my shoulders, as if a carrying pole I had borne for half a lifetime had finally been set down. But the eyes that had opened along those 30,000 li could not simply close again. All the mountains, rivers, crops and crafts I had seen needed a place to rest. In the years that followed, I buried my mother and my brothers. The house grew quieter than before. At 49, I finally received a minor post, instructor in Fenyi County. It was an unranked position without even an official residence. Fellow Juran who heard of it sighed with pity. A man who had ranked 3rd in the entire province, nearly 50 years old, sent to a poor little county to teach. Only I knew that the quiet of Fenyi was exactly what I needed. I cleaned one of the cold, dilapidated study rooms and named it the Studio of the Unemployed Scholar. By day, I taught the students the 4 books required for the examinations. By night, behind a closed door and under a dim oil lamp, I began to write words that had nothing to do with the civil service. I wrote first about food, how a single grain of rice travels from swollen seed to the harvest bin. Then about clothing, how silkworms are raised, how silk is reeled, how the threads are lifted on the flower loom. Then dyeing, salt making, sugar boiling, porcelain, iron smelting, shipbuilding, cart making, coal mining, oil pressing, paper making, wine brewing. Every measurement, every temperature, every proportion had to be as exact as I could make it. I wished I could verify every detail with my own hands, but I was a poor instructor with little money and no wide courtyard for experiments. All I had were the hard-won memories of those 30,000 li and the small circle of light under the oil lamp. When the draft was finished, I sent it to Tu Bogong, an old friend who had once ranked just behind me on the provincial list. He came to my broken room, sat in the wind, and turned the pages slowly. When he reached the chapters on farming, he said nothing. When he reached the chapters on metalworking, he paused, looked up, and asked whether the tools had truly been tested through many trials. At the end, he closed the manuscript, pressed his hand upon it, and said the words I would remember until my last breath. Beautiful essays of 100 pages will be forgotten in 10 years. But this, only you on this earth could have written it. I told him the title I had long held in my heart, Tiangong Kaiwu, the exploitation of the works of nature. Heaven creates, man completes. 5 parts the work of heaven, 5 parts the skill of man. In the 4th month of Chongzhen 10, in my 51st year, the book was finally printed in Nanchang with more than 100 illustrations. At the end of the preface, I wrote the most honest sentence of my life. This book has nothing to do with official rank or the pursuit of fame. It is meant to be placed under the pillow of those who still care about the livelihood of the people. I sat under the lamp for a long time after that. The flame was small and steady. In the years that followed, the Ming dynasty collapsed around me. I watched the empire change, watched refugees move along the roads, watched the friend who had helped print my book die while fleeing. My elder brother chose poison rather than serve the new dynasty. I refused every invitation to leave. Someone had to stay and guard the knowledge that had been paid for with the sweat of ordinary people. In my final years, I lived among the muddy fields of Yaxi village. I forbade my sons to sit for the examinations or to take office. I had walked that long road for 30 years and knew too well what waited at the end. At night, I would sit quietly and turn the pages of Tiangong Kaiwu. In the chapter on boats, I saw again the deep footprints of the trackers along the canal. In the chapter on salt, I remembered the white smoke of the boiling pans. In the chapter on pottery, I saw the kiln fires of Jingdezhen that once lit half the night sky. Outside, scholars still clutched the books of the sages and practiced the essays of the new dynasty. My hands, marked by years of ordinary work, had written something that had nothing to do with rank or fortune. I lived 80 years. I watched one world end and another begin. The books of the sages I memorized for a lifetime could not save a single suffering commoner. Yet the book I wrote after walking 30,000 miles recorded how rice is grown, how iron is forged, how cloth is woven, emperors die, dynasties fall, but people must still eat and wear clothes. As long as there are hands that labor under the sun and rain, the truth written in this book will remain. In my last moments I could no longer speak. With the final strength left in me, I made my eldest son bring the book and place it in my hands. My fingers moved slowly over the 4 characters on the cover. All the words of a lifetime reduced themselves to 2 quiet syllables. Guard it. Heaven entrusted the myriad things to humankind. It is for human hands to pass them on, generation after generation. This life was enough.